So there are a few rules for tonight. One, there's a 10-minute pitch. We don't care how many slides they use. It's up to them. Madeline is going to be making sure that they keep within the 10-minute time frame, and after 10 minutes, we'll cut off their mic. We're going to have 15 minutes from our judges, and then from there, the companies will go through all three of our companies, and our judges will go and deliberate, and then we'll continue to have some more fun in here. So y'all ready to get started? Yeah. All right. Cluey? Maryclaire? Hey, there you are. All right, great. Maryclaire, the stage is yours.
Thank you. All right. Leave this here in case I need it. Okay, I just want to make sure. Great. All right. Hey, y'all. I'm Maryclaire, founder of Cluey, and very excited to be here tonight. We are on the verge of the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth ever to happen in our lifetimes. In the next 3 decades, $30 trillion of wealth will transfer from baby boomers to younger generations like millennials and Gen Z. And those younger generations are consuming products differently, they're investing their money differently, and they're conducting business differently. How do I know this? Well, aside from seeing the writing on the wall in my former work as a CNN journalist, as well as my work as a corporate and investment researcher, I also just happen to be your run-of-the-mill, impact-driven, avocado-loving millennial. And that's really where Cluey's story started, applying my skill set to solve a personal frustration of wanting an easier way to align my purchases with my values. And then realizing that that evolved into being something much bigger. So previously, consumers' biggest concerns remain around cost and function. And while those are still concerns of consumers today, younger consumers today care about a lot more. What are the impacts on the planet? What are the impacts on workers? What are the impacts on their families? Consumers making purchases today see the brands that they buy as an extension of themselves and an extension of their values. It's even more staggering by the numbers. 83% of millennials want brands to align with their values. 78% of consumers want to exert their power on brands to make society better. And 2021 saw a record year of socially responsible spending. And the phenomenon is the same on the business side. So previously, the main 2 priorities were increasing shareholder value and profitability. And of course, those are still paramount. But today, with the increased pressure from investors and shareholders wanting to see ESG metrics, which is a new way that investors are evaluating a company's impacts on people and the planet, as well as pressures from conscious consumers who want products that are made more sustainably and more ethically, those pressure points are causing boardroom conversations to look a lot different these days. And by the numbers, it's also staggering there again. This stat actually comes from my former employer, the second largest global research firm in the world. They've seen an interest in ESG from their clients skyrocket in the last year, and it's 10x in the last 2 years. So clearly everyone is banging down the door trying to get access to this information. What is the problem? Well, with the meteoric rise of interest in this space has come a fire hose of new information, new labels, new buzzwords, new ratings, new certifications, none of which are standardized, none of which are centralized, which means that making sense of this space to the untrained eye completely inaccessible. And when we spoke to our users about how they went about solving this problem before Cluey, we saw an inefficiency, massive inefficiency of hours wasted of consumers' time trying to do their own research, some even going to the lengths of reading companies' annual reports. So that's why we built Cluey. We saw that massive gap of access to information as a massive opportunity. And the headline really is that we're democratizing this information for everyone. We do that by doing the research ourselves, aggregating the best third-party sources that are out there, translating those third-party sources into digestible snapshots of a company's impact on people, the planet, and politics, and so much more. Is the brand a woman-owned brand if you care about that? Is it a veteran-owned brand if you care about that? Is it made in the US if you care about that? And then we disseminate that information through a user-friendly Chrome extension and web platform where users can log in, disclose what they care about and the brands that they're currently buying, discover whether those brands are aligned with their values, and find alternatives that might be better aligned. And even though we're just starting out and we're very early in our journey, people are loving it. We were able to raise first part of a pre-seed round led by a local Louisiana-based venture capital fund, and we've put that money to work. In November, we launched an MVP, and we're currently iterating on that minimum viable product with feedback from our early adopters. We then secured 2 key hires, both in product marketing and data and research. That second key hire, which we secured in February, has been able to 4x our database of brands, going from 1,000 to 4,000 brands by the end of this month. And even more exciting is when we speak to our users, getting feedback about Cluey. 50% told us about an anecdote where they switched products in their house because of information they learned from Cluey. 50% of consumers change their behavior because of what they learned from Cluey. And then through the tireless and dedicated efforts of building a trustworthy and credible brand, we've been able to grow our total universe of email subscribers, social followers, and product users to actually 4,500. Those numbers are updated after checking this morning. And that's really exciting for us. And ultimately, you're probably wondering right about now, well, how does it make money? So Cluey's business model is a flywheel that centers on users. The more users we get, the ability that we can instigate on our business model. And the way that we get more users, of course, is through enhancing our product and enhancing our data. But once we can instigate that business model and initiate that second part of the flywheel, we have 2 paths to revenue. The first is ultimately a data play. We license both our brand data and our user data. So we're collecting 2 types of data. I already discussed the type of data that we're collecting on the brand side, but on the user side, we're not just collecting who the users are and their demographics, but we're collecting rich data on issues they care about, user sentiment, and other things. So we're licensing that data to interested parties. The second way is through affiliate partnerships. I like to use the term honey meets Wirecutter. If you know those companies or are familiar with them. Honey because of the Chrome extension, Wirecutter because of the trusted brand to recommend products. We would only create these partnerships with companies and brands that score above a certain threshold on our people and planet impacts. And how do we see this projecting out? We see this as being a massive opportunity. So we're making 2 assumptions here. First is with Honey, applying a similar average revenue per user as Honey. If you're not familiar with Honey, it's a Chrome extension you download on your computer. It scrapes the web for coupons and saves consumers money as they shop online. Honey averages $40 revenue per user because they monetize in the same 2 ways that we plan to monetize: affiliate partnerships and selling their user data. When you apply that amount across a growth of users over time, what you see when you add those 10 and 20x tech valuation multiples to an exit, we're in the $2 to $4 billion range. The second assumption that we're making here with what we can grow is applying a similar user growth trajectory to that of the Skim. For those who are familiar or not familiar with the Skim, it's an email newsletter targeted at young professional women. We also target a very similar demographic user base. So again, all of this happens because it centers on growing that user base. And we see getting on the map at that 100,000 user mark to start, and BREW can help us get there. But who are these users, and is it feasible to get 5 million of them? We think so. If you look at the fact that 83.5 million users who are digital consumers under 40 in the US, capturing just a fraction of that doesn't seem so hard. We can then even pinpoint deeper who our users are. They skew female, they skew under 34, and they're very motivated by certain issues. And when we need to attract those users and, of course, eventually attract companies to start working with us on our paths to revenue, on the consumer side, we've tried and tested some really innovative impact quizzes that convert users at just 50 cents a click. On the company side, the great thing about Cluey is that we've created a consumer-facing product that acts as a lead gen engine for the business side of what we're doing. We have 2 inbound requests right now from Lululemon and Method Soaps, both of which came from business decision makers who are using Cluey as individual consumers. And if there's not enough validation out there, the fact that other people are chasing this idea certainly makes it a good one in my mind. 2 things that make us different, though, than our competitors. We are a one-stop shop. We're not just focused on political impacts or environmental impacts or social impacts. We cover the gamut, and that's been reiterated to us time and time again by our users. The other thing that makes us unique is that we have a dynamic interface between our 2 data sets, that user data set and that brand data set. So if you say you care about X, Y, and Z, we'll find you a brand that represents those values. And so this clearly is a space that's getting more and more crowded, but in a good way. I'm learning about a new VC-backed player in this space every month. And what that means to me is that the train is leaving the station, we're getting on that train and building it into a rocket ship. Can't do that without the amazing people who are behind me that span the gamut and backgrounds from product and data in high growth B2B and B2C startups, as well as big names like Talkwalker, Edelman Research, and Huffington Post. But thank you so much for your time. Really looking forward to answering your questions. And just as a Louisiana native, I'm very excited and proud to get to pitch my company in my home state.
Thank you very much. Judges, questions?
So I'll start off. You spoke about compiling and gathering a lot of consumer data. Could you speak to us about how you're protecting the consumer data? I have a follow-up question, but I'll let you answer that one first.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the consumer data side, protecting PII or personally identifiable information is obviously a huge concern, given that we are already in the space of understanding consumer safety. Consumer safety doesn't just apply, by the way, to whether or not a product burns you or is made with a harmful chemical. It also applies to how are brands protecting your online and digital footprint as well. So that's something that's very important to us. We've definitely made that a priority with our legal team to make sure that we're warehousing and storing that data in an appropriate way, or never putting that PII in any way that could be put at risk from hackers or cyber attackers.
I have a follow-up. So could you also talk to us about the technology platform that this is built upon?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you mind elaborating on that in terms of like what elements of our stack you're most interested in?
So I know you mentioned a Chrome extension, but also there's the web interface, right? So,
yes. Yeah, so basically on our website, it acts as like a large database, searchable database where you can search brands and you can do multiple functions within that web platform. You can create your household footprint, you can add what's in your bathroom, what's in your kitchen, what's in your closet, and then see that overall footprint. The Chrome extension acts purely as an extension of that. So as you're surfing the web and maybe you're on Amazon searching for Clorox wipes, you're going to get a little pop-up that lets you know that we have data on those brands, and you can see impacts on both Amazon as well as Clorox.
Could you help me with the revenue model again? Just kind of maybe walk me through some examples as how you monetize this user base that you're hopefully going to build?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the data licensing side, there's two types of ways that we license our data. Again, the brand licensing of our data goes out to interested parties that would represent like e-commerce marketplaces or micro retailers who want to attract that conscious consumer base and increase their transaction rate amongst those conscious consumers. So a good example of this is there's an incumbent player in our space who has recently secured a partnership with Microsoft's Bing's shopping platform, where they're using their data to power the results on Microsoft Bing. We are having a very, very early stage with Google Shopping data to see if that would be a relevant and interesting play for them as well. So that's how we would license the brand data. But
if I'm the brand that's interested in your data, do I pay a fixed fee? Is it based on? Do I pay you based on how many people buy my product? I'm not sure. I don't.
Sure.
Understand.
So on the brand side, there's two ways that a brand could pay us money ultimately. It's through accessing that data, that rich, insightful data through like a portal that they can view how are consumers reacting to their brands, in Cluey, what's the sentiment changing, how are the consumer demographics and issues they care about changing over time. So that's kind of like a market research, market insights play, which is, marketing tech is a huge space in and of itself. So that's one way. The second way is through those affiliate partnerships. So if a brand scores above a certain threshold on our People and Planet score, we would reach out to them and say, hey, you're doing really well amongst these users. We can help expand and amplify your brand to more users who might be aligned with what you represent. And we would actually put an affiliate link on any click-outs from our product to then an ultimate sale, which gives us a small portion of the commission of that sale.
Have you generated any revenue at this point?
No, we are a pre-revenue company.
And back to the users, you have 4,500 users. Your goal is to get 100,000 users, where that sort of be critical mass for you to maybe prove this out a little further. how did you find the 4,500 users? How do you expect to build to 100K? Do you have any thoughts on what it'll cost you from a customer acquisition standpoint to get that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the, how we have attracted those users so far, I think it's very much in that it's a content. It's been a very heavy content play to attract those users. Through a viral email that we just sent out this week, we were able to update our numbers by over 150 additional users who are now hopefully going to be nurtured to be lifelong Cluey users. So there's different ways that we go about doing that. The simplest and most delightful way that we do that is through providing a very small, easy lift quiz that consumers can take to pick their favorite snack brands, Chips Ahoy or Tate's Cookies, and learn about the impacts of the brands that they selected at the end of their quiz. We then continue to nurture those relationships and eventually try and get them to engage more deeply in Cluey by downloading the extension and doing other things within our product down the road. So that's ultimately our most tried and tested acquisition practice. And we've been able to convert users at 50 cents a click on that. So if getting to 100,000 users, 50 cents a click, we can get that even lower to some extent with that K factor of that organic virality through content posts, et cetera.
The 50 cents a click is based on what?
Those quizzes that we
That's
do
what it
digital.
cost you.
We do digital advertising with those quizzes and target very specific users based on what who fits within our target demographic, and it's been at or under 50 cents a click.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of them has to do with the metrics. So you talk about, aggregating these third-party sets of data about ESG factors, CSR factors. One of the issues that everybody is having with ESG and CSR is these third parties don't use the same kinds of metrics. So what's your mechanism for aggregating them in a way that is sort of
Apples to apples.
Apples to apples.
Yes.
Exactly. And similar to that, when you're looking at people's desired, impact of their dollar, it's not always the same. So how do you figure out for, social and political, you can pretty easily have objective data about environmental impacts, governance factors. But when it comes to social and political, it tends to be a little bit squishier, it tends to be more subjective, what people care about. So what's your methodology
Sure.
for identifying those?
So there's a couple of ways that we present our data to our users. First and most important that I think is very applicable to this question are our people and planet scores. Ultimately, that just translates to environmental and social and environmental impacts in that order. The way that we aggregate those is through not just ESG ratings providers, but regulatory government violation trackers, for example, from OSHA, the EPA, et cetera, as well as impact assessment tools and a few other accreditation boards, et cetera. We see that as operating similar to how the S&P Global ESG tool works, where they don't do the evaluations themselves, but instead aggregate from all of the current ESG ratings to kind of like even out the median score ultimately. So that's ultimately what we're doing as well, as applying that same level of methodology. We translate each of those data inputs to our own scale, and then we weight each input based on how we're seeing this changing landscape of information evolve. So as these ratings providers get better, we get better as well, but some ratings providers might become leaders and others might become laggards, and we might remove some of those from our proprietary algorithm. So that's to answer your first question of how we bring it all together. The other thing that you mentioned on things like people care about different things. Consumers care about a lot of different things. I mean, I'm from Louisiana, and here in Louisiana, we care about a bunch of different things. So those are the only two parts of our scores where there is like a rating, an A through F rating. On the political contributions, we simply show where political contribution history has gone from executives at that company or the company's political action committee in the last 3 federal election cycles. We don't say buy from this company or don't buy from this company based on their political contribution. We just give that information to consumers and let them do with that information as they wish. And then the third type of data that we're showcasing are what I like to call brand tags. So if a brand is woman-owned, or if a brand is veteran-owned, or if a brand is part of the Rainforest Alliance, there's all these different things, or B Corp certified, there's all these different things that people are starting to catch on to or care about, whether it's through their own affinity values or otherwise, and we're displaying that as well, but we're displaying that separately. So that way you can get a holistic picture of a brand's impact across the people score, the planet score, the political contribution, the tags, and we even include recent news on the brand page as well. So you get a full snapshot.
5 more minutes of questions, 5 more minutes.
I have one more quick question, hopefully quick. If you won $100,000, what would you do with it, and how long would that take you?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now our burn rate is $20,000 a month, just over $20,000 a month. We want to deploy that capital to do a couple of things, and we're also currently raising as well, so we hope to round out that capital. But what we would use specifically that use of funds for is rounding out some necessary engineering and development resources to enhance the known feedback that we know we need to improve about both our web platform and our Chrome extension. So that's known, and we know that by adding brands and enhancing the product, that's a huge way that we attract users. The second way is to start deploying our tried and true tested methods of acquisition that we talked about earlier.
I have a quick question. So what is your roadmap, and how does it align with the money that you're trying to raise?
Yeah, absolutely. So those 2 points that I just mentioned, plus once we're able to raise additional capital, we can start then looking to bring on full-time and a larger engineering presence to build the parts of our product that will ultimately allow us to monetize. So that's like a brand-facing portal where brands can engage and see insights in the same way that you can use Crunchbase or some of these other insights-based platforms. So that's on our roadmap basically in the next year, but what we really want to do is we want to capitalize on grabbing these users while this market continues to be hot. It's always going to be hot. It's not a fad, but the thing is that you have to place your stake in the sand early to really capture this movement.
And
So growing users is our biggest priority.
And what's your timeline
On
getting to each of these milestones? So
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with our user growth milestones, we hope to hit that 100,000 mark by the end of this year. Once we do that, the game changes. The game is completely different, and that's where that flywheel makes its first big rotation, and things are starting to move differently. I like to orient a lot of our goals towards that metric, but hopefully that gives you a good sense. Once we're past that, then the next stages are on building out the other parts of our product that allow us to monetize, and going for the moon.
What is the total capital that you're looking to raise?
Right now, we're looking to raise a total, including the money that we've already raised, of $600,000.
Just a couple of questions. So how many users do you think it'll take, and how much capital to get to sort of a break-even level, or where you no longer need additional capital? And then on your market landscape chart, is there a company there that you're trying to emulate, or that from a revenue, kind of back to the revenue models, is there somebody a little further along that's having some success, and how do they do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Good On You is the name of the incumbent player that I referenced earlier that just secured that partnership with Microsoft Bing. They're an Australian-based company. One of the reasons they're farther along is that this movement is a little bit more nascent here in the US, but has been pretty strong and growing in European and Australian markets for a few years now. So they're a bit farther along. But they are on the far end of that spectrum where they're very narrow on their impact focus. They just focus on fashion brands, and their methodology and data is all centered around the fashion industry of how they're rating their brands. So we're basically trying to emulate what they're doing, but across all consumer purchases.
But again, how do they get paid?
Affiliate partnerships and licensing their data.
Okay.
What's your exit strategy?
I wish I could.
How much
Am I
money and
able
how
to bring
many
my slide up? Ultimately, we see an acquisition as a very large potential for what we're doing. This space is being looked at not only in the, it's not only being looked at by these players who are specifically targeting conscious consumerism, but you have large financial firms, large information services firms, large market tech firms who are also looking at this space in a very targeted way. So we see the opportunity, if we can position ourselves as the #1 player and really achieve our mission of empowering conscious consumers and empowering this movement, of finding a mission-aligned partner that we would be willing to be acquired by.
No, Mike had asked a question.
Well, how many users do you think it'll take before you kind of
Break even.
get break even?
It completely depends to some extent of how quickly we choose to execute on either of those two paths to revenue at certain points. Once you grow that organic audience, looking at a company like Honey, for example, they were acquired by PayPal for $4 billion, and they weren't even in a state where they were being acquired, I think, by an actual, actually their valuation did line up, but I think that their acquisition was more from a strategic advantage than it was from an acquisition. But to answer your question more succinctly, I think once we're in that 1 million user mark and above, it's totally game over, in a good way.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you so much, Cluey. Let's hear it for Cluey. Good job.